Welcome to the woods, video number 4. Being a Sunday, I thought I'd crack 2 out. Sorry. I'm going to tell you a little story, if the dog gets off my lap. See, a lot of people who see what I've got here and say, "Cool, aren't you lucky?" Wasn't luck. I wasn't just walking down the street and someone said, do you want a cabin and some woodland and you can have it for free. That'd be lucky. Took hard work. Took hard work to get to the level where I was able to buy the land. Took hard work to build it. It took determination. And a lot of people that look at it think I must be a builder or have some sort of construction skill, and I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what I was doing. There isn't one part of the cabin that I knew what I was doing or that I didn't make a mistake on. From the foundations to the roof, I made mistakes all the way through it. I'd finish a job that took me 3 months, and when I'd just finished it, I would figure out a way I could have done it at half the cost and half the time. But I'm a firm believer in going with what you've got. And it works, and I live in it, and it's cool. So not too much of a worry. But I want to run through in these videos some of the mistakes I made. And this one I'm going to tell you about is to do with the batteries that run all the electrics for the cabin. Now at the moment I'm using 8 6-volt batteries to give a 48-volt system, which runs into an inverter, changes it to 230 using witchcraft or whatever, and powers the cabin. Well, the first battery I bought, 48-volt, was a traction battery, which is the biggest battery I have ever seen in my life. It was 4 foot high, 2 foot wide, and 5 foot long, and weighed just over a ton. And I know it was just over a ton, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I bought it off of eBay and had it delivered to a mate's workshop down the road. And next door to him was a company that used forklift trucks. So with a forklift, they managed to lift it into the back of my mate's pickup. And we drove it up to the woods. And we got it in. And then 4 of us stood around his pickup, scratching our heads, because we hadn't thought about how we were going to get it off. So we now had a 1-ton battery, just over a ton, on the back of his pickup in the middle of the woods. So I rang another mate who was a scaffolder, and he came up and we built a platform the same height as the pickup, and using ratchet straps we put it round this battery and ratchet it off of the back of the pickup slowly onto this scaffold platform. As he drove away with the pickup and we ratcheted it, we got it off the pickup onto the platform. So now we've got a just over 1 ton battery on a platform in the middle of the woods. Now, as it happened, I didn't need the battery straight away. I was rigged up with a generator and everything else. I didn't have the solar on the roof yet, so it could stay where it was. And there it sat, on its platform, covered over with a tarpaulin, until I needed it, which was about a year later. So come a year later, I think I know how we're going to move this. We're going to get his pickup back up here. We'll get an engine hoist the battery up onto his pickup. We couldn't drive it round the side of the cabin, not enough room, so we would go into my neighbour's piece of woodland, through the trees, and put it down behind the cabin. So we got the engine hoist, and we hoisted the battery off of the platform, and we took the platform away, and just as we took the platform away, it snapped the engine hoist, which was rated at 1 ton. So that's how we know it weighed over a ton. It literally snapped the arm of the engine hoist. So now we're looking at a 1 ton, just over a ton, battery in the middle of the woods and a broken engine hoist. So I phoned another mate who had a tractor, who drove up about an hour later, and with a great big chain linked it onto the battery and lifted it with the fork arm on his tractor. We then drove that through my neighbour's plot of woodland, which took about 2 hours to manoeuvre this huge tractor through the trees, round to the back of the cabin, where we dropped it onto a board I laid out on the floor. I then built a shed around the battery, because there was no way I was moving it again. So I built the shed round the battery. 2 months later, I had an electrician come round. We fitted the inverter, plugged in the generator so that that would be running through an inverter into the cabin, linked up the battery. Nothing. Dead. Flat. So I just said, well, can I charge it off of the generator? No. How long's the battery been sat there, he said. I said, well, not that long, about a year. He said, it's knackered, mate. It hasn't been charged or discharged in over 12 months. There's no it is wank. Excuse my language. It's completely knackered. You see, I didn't know what I was doing. I haven't known what I was doing all the way through it. I didn't realise that if you buy a battery, it needs to be discharged and then recharged on a regular basis. If you just buy it and leave it, it goes flat and stays flat. So that was a £1,000 mistake. I'm left with a battery which is the size of Godzilla, which is of no use to man or beast. The scrap value on the individual cells in this great big battery was actually pretty good. It was about half the cost of the battery, about 500 quid. But I had to then get each individual cell out of a solid steel box. Now, in order to do that, I didn't have an engine hoist anymore. I had a car jack. So I used 4 or 5 blocks of wood and a car jack and some paracord round the terminals of each 2-volt cell onto the car jack, and jacked each 2-volt cell out of the cage and then lifted them onto the floor. Now that took about 2 days to strip those cells out, and then carried each individual cell, now just over a ton's worth, round the cabin, up the path to where the car was parked, the pickup. Load them into the pickup, take them down the scrapyard, got me £500, put that towards buying some new batteries that I could link up straight away. And that's kind of typical for how this build went. But it went okay in the end. Anyway, you lot, if you ever want any information on batteries, I'm probably not the bloke to ask, but I do know a bloke with a tractor. Speak to you soon, you lot.